Soraya Peters, soprano, Abigail Payne, pianist, and Elizabeth Payne, speaker. Try Me Good King by Libby Larson. The composer was born in Wilmington, Delaware. She's one of America's foremost prolific composers living today. She was intrigued with the personal consequences of power that befell the Tudor family, as well as the struggle between church and state. So you're going to see all that tonight. And I love interactive performances, and you're going to see one tonight. A few words about the artist. Soraya Peters is a versatile crossover artist, music educator, and arts leader based in Abilene. She earned her Bachelor of Music and Choral Music education from Hardin-Simmons University, graduating summa cum laude. While at HSU, she's discovered a passion for classical vocal performance, becoming a four-time National Association of Teachers of Singing, National Singing finalist, and performing roles in both opera and musical theater. Soraya is committed to building accessible and community-centered musical experiences. I love that as a musician. She is the music director of Course Company's pop a cappella ensemble, Backbeat, and is a beginner and adult choir, Abbey Voice, both of which she developed to create welcoming environments for singers of all backgrounds. Soraya has also built a strong career in arts administration. She previously served as director of sales and marketing for Abilene Philharmonic and currently serves as director of annual giving at McMurray University. In February 2026, Soraya will present at the Texas Music Educators Association Convention, her session. Hear this. This is the title of her session. So I graduated. Now what? I would say, focusing on navigating the transition from collegiate musical training into professional life, balancing teaching, performing, administration, and personal fulfillment while building a sustainable career and artistic identity. I hope everybody at Team A goes to hear that, because it'll be wonderful. And they need to know this, and budding musicians need to know how she's navigated it so well. Abigail Payne is a graduate of the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, where she earned a Master of Music in Collaborative Piano. She graduated magna cum laude with a BA in piano from Abilene Christian University. As a student at UCSA, Abigail performed in numerous recitals. Ms. Payne has performed as a soloist and collaborative pianist in master classes with numerous distinguished musicians. Mrs. Payne also was staff accompanist for the HSU School of Music for 5 years, remains a sought-after pianist throughout the big country, and is currently the collaborative pianist for the HSU choirs. In addition to being a performer, Abigail has worked in arts administration as the education and community outreach coordinator for the Abilene Philharmonic Orchestra and the executive director of Course Abilene. In 2025, she was hired as executive director for the Abilene Preservation League, and she has wasted no time infusing the arts into the organization. Way to go, Abigail, right? Elizabeth Payne first developed a love for British history as a literature student at Cooper High School in Abilene. At Texas A&M, she earned a Master of Education in Curriculum and Instruction with certification in secondary English and history. She graduated summa cum laude with a Bachelor of Arts in English in 2007. Elizabeth returned to Cooper to teach English, mainly British literature, for 14 years. She also sponsored a creative writing club for several years before becoming a sponsor for Cooper's chapter of the National Honor Society. In 2017, she was voted Campus Teacher of the Year. How about that? In 2022, Elizabeth coordinated with Angelo State University to teach AP Dual Credit English course through Abilene ISD. The next year, she stepped back from teaching to focus on full-time motherhood. That's wonderful, isn't it? Over the years, Elizabeth has traveled to historic locations in the United Kingdom, like Westminster Abbey, Hampton Court, and only deepened her appreciation for the dynamic historical figures who shaped English history and consequently our own. Please welcome our wonderful performers for tonight.
privilege of honoring that request, to listen to each of their stories and judge them on their own terms. Let's start with Henry's first wife, Catherine of Aragon. On this very night, 524 years ago, on November 14, 1501, the beautiful 15-year-old Catherine of Aragon walked down the aisle of the old St. Paul's Cathedral in a lavish wedding to the Prince of Wales. She was daughter to the mighty Isabella and Ferdinand of Spain, and Henry VII had desperately sought her hand in marriage for his heir to shore up the fragile Tudor dynasty. But the groom was not Henry, who was only 10 at the time, but his older brother, the 15-year-old Prince Arthur. Tragically, the marriage only lasted a few months before Arthur died. For 7 years, Catherine found herself in limbo as her father and Henry VII negotiated her fate. During those same years, the teenage Prince Henry chafed under the restrictions his increasingly paranoid father imposed on him to protect him. Henry was athletic and idealistic, with an intellect that impressed even the great humanist Erasmus. So when his father died, Henry burst out of his chains, ready to take England into a glorious future that united the best of medieval chivalry and Renaissance enlightenment. And the woman he chose to be by his side was Catherine. They just needed approval from the Pope or a papal dispensation, since Catherine had been married to Henry's brother. It seemed like a mere technicality that was easily overcome, but in time it would come back to haunt both of them. Now it might seem surprising for Henry to choose a bride 5.5 years older than him. She was 23 to his 18 at the time of their marriage. But perhaps in those early years, the young and inexperienced king found Catherine to be a guiding and stabilizing force. Catherine was confident and well-educated. During her widowhood, she gained diplomatic experience as the first female ambassador in Europe. Catherine was a leader. 4 years into their marriage, while Henry was at a siege in France, the heavily pregnant Catherine donned a special suit of armor and led an army north to victory against a Scottish invasion. But their relationship was also passionate. One account tells of how Henry disguised himself as Robin Hood, broke into the Queen's chambers, and whisked her away for a romantic evening. Catherine, it could be romantic. Catherine was beautiful, brilliant, and beloved by her subjects, the perfect queen in every way, except one. Now, each queen has a badge, and Catherine's contain the image of a pomegranate, which you can see here. It's a reminder of her Spanish heritage, and unfortunately, in a cruel twist of irony, it's also a symbol of fertility. Henry and Catherine endured the unspeakable grief of at least 5 miscarriages, stillbirths, and the death of a 2-month-old son. Catherine and Henry must have felt cursed. Their only child to survive adulthood was a daughter, Mary. You can see her right there. Catherine poured all her energy into educating Mary to rule England, but Henry could not accept it. There were still challengers to the Tudors, and the unprecedented idea of a ruling queen only increased the political uncertainty that the Tudors so greatly and legitimately feared. In studying a passage in Leviticus, Henry began to believe that he actually was cursed for marrying his brother's widow. And there was also this beguiling lady in waiting named Anne Boleyn. So after 7 years of papal bureaucracy and passionate impatience for Anne, Henry took increasingly drastic measures to undo his marriage with Catherine. But Catherine kept firing back, arguing that the dispensation didn't even matter because she never consummated the marriage with Arthur, and that meant her marriage to Henry was legally binding in man's eyes and God's. Eventually, Henry held a public trial before English leaders and a representative of the Pope to reiterate why the marriage needed to be dissolved. But Catherine stole the show. She made a dramatic entrance and knelt before the king. You can see it represented in this picture here. But she passionately declared her innocence and begged for justice. Henry was still unmoved, but public and papal opinion was firmly on her side. Backed into a corner, Henry had only one option left: to break with the Catholic Church and have his own archbishop declare the marriage invalid. Now, Catherine could not be physically tortured into submitting to this decision, but Henry went as close as he absolutely could. Over the last 5 years of her life, Catherine was increasingly removed from court and her supporters. Most cruelly, she was forbidden from seeing the Princess Mary unless both agreed the marriage was invalid. Catherine tactfully advised her daughter to follow her conscience, even though she knew it meant that she would never see her daughter again. I sometimes try to imagine Catherine of Aragon in her final days, virtually a prisoner, racked by illness and grief, and forbidden from the comfort of her only daughter. What memories and emotions dominated her reflections? Even in this bitter end, she embodied her queenly motto, humble and loyal, as faithfully as she had done in those early golden days. Too weak to write, she dictated one last letter to Henry, the text of which will be Soraya's first song. And now Abigail will talk about Louis Larson's musical setting of these women's words.
Sit right here at the piano because Soraya said it was awkward. I appreciate it, I think. So these songs are not easily grasped upon first listen. So my goal is to give you some ideas and musical gestures for your ear to latch onto as you listen for the first time. I will talk about the compositional devices and musical quotations that Louis Larson employs so that you can understand how brilliant her composition is, and hopefully better understand the set and more fully enjoy it. The way I approached each of these songs for my portion of this recital was to choose words or phrases that describe the general mood of each song, and then analyze the composition to determine just how Larson evoked that mood or atmosphere. So for this first one, the way I would describe the piece is ominous, resigned, foreboding, but still stately, generally static with sudden pops of sound and drama. So the first compositional device to mention is that of a drone. A drone is a note or chord that is continuously sounded throughout most or all of the piece. So think of bagpipes. There's a continuous low pitch sounding with a melody happening on top. This is the opening, and you'll see this repeated F in the bass clef, which continues throughout the entire piece. This drone throughout creates both tension and stability throughout the piece. Throughout this set, Larson musically quotes different tunes by late Renaissance composers, and she said these songs were composed during the reign of Elizabeth I, and while they are cast as some of the finest examples of the Golden Age, they also create a tapestry of unsung words which comment on the real situation of each doomed queen. Tapestry is the perfect word because the way that Larson weaves these borrowed melodies into her original composition is in a really seamless and beautiful way. In this first piece, she quotes a song called In Darkness Let Me Dwell by John Dowland, who was an English master lutenist, singer and composer best known for his melancholic lute songs. So snippets of Dowland's melody appear 3 times in this song, and here's an example of text from Dowland's original tune. It says, "My music, hellish, jarring sounds to banish friendly sleep." I think that's the most metal lyric I've ever heard. It's just really evocative and really cool. So Libby quotes Dowland's tune here on page 5 of my music, and this is the way the tune sounds. So you'll hear that 3 times throughout. Other things to note is this song has the thinnest texture of any of the songs in the set, so that means there's the least amount of activity or voices in the song. But it also has the widest range in terms of the accompaniment. I play all the way from an A1 to a B6, so I get to use most of the breadth of the piano in this piece. I identified a prominent interval in each piece, and for this one, the major 6th and minor 6th are the most prominent interval, and they act as bell tolls, which really add to the drama and the foreboding feeling, especially as the Queen references, quote, "the hour of my death." Here's an example of a really recognizable hour chime, that of Big Ben in London. So I'm going to play it and emphasize the interval of the 6th from A to C. with the exception of the bell tolls. The sudden dynamic shift every time the bells toll are very impactful because the piece is so quiet otherwise. Larson has indicated bell toll 12 times, and in the final seconds of the piece, the bell tolls more slowly as the 16th notes slow down, the hourglass runs out, and the piece ends. Here is Catherine of Aragon.
Anne may have been from a lesser noble family, but her unique upbringing gave her a sharp mind and remarkable art, and philosophy of the Renaissance as it was taking shape, listening to powerful royal women discuss issues like the moral and intellectual equality of women and Martin Luther's arguments for church reform. When she returned to England to become a lady-in-waiting to Catherine of Aragon, her dynamic wit, magnetic charm, and daring fashion, like the French should. You see right there, look how much hair she's showing. So scandalous. It made everyone take notice. First, another Henry, Henry Percy, who was a powerful nobleman, wooed her into a secret engagement and was furious when their match was broken off. How she reacted when she learned was because King Henry himself was interested in her is a mystery. We do know that at first she refused his advances. Henry's love letters, one of which is included in this next song, shows a man completely at her mercy. Anne's responses sadly don't survive, so it's hard to gauge her feelings. At least it seems she was convincing and convinced that she could give Henry everything he wanted. What made Anne so controversial wasn't just her threat to Henry's marriage, but her involvement, especially as a woman, in shaping Henry's religious and political views around his divorce. She proudly displayed William Tyndale's illegal English translation of the New Testament, and there's evidence that she gave Henry a copy of one of Tyndale's tracts urging kings to defy the Pope's authority. She was pivotal in the appointment of Protestant leaning Thomas Cranmer as Archbishop of Canterbury, the highest church position in England. Perhaps the same uncertainty that led Henry to rely on Catherine at the beginning of his reign now led him to this new source of confidence and decisiveness in Anne. Whatever it was about her, it led Henry to that most dramatic and controversial of decisions in English history, the break with the Catholic Church. Anne's direct involvement made her deeply unpopular with more conservative leaders, but her initial motto was pretty clear. See it up here. Let them grumble. That is how it's going to be. What a great choice. As queen, her badge is a family symbol, the falcon, and it's atop a barren stump. It's part of her promise to restore life to the Tudor family tree. But sadly, it was a promise Anne couldn't keep. There was disappointment, but still hope after the healthy birth of the Princess Elizabeth. But then Anne miscarried. Divorcing Catherine was supposed to have removed God's wrath from his reign, but how could Henry explain this? Fortunately, Anne became pregnant again in January of 1536, and then Catherine of Aragon died. Anne just had a few months to live in her short reign under her new motto of the most happy, but it was not to last. Just a few weeks later, Henry was knocked unconscious for 2 hours in a jousting accident. The rumor that he had died shocked Anne into early labor. 5 days later, the same day that Catherine of Aragon was laid to rest, Anne miscarried and sealed her fate. Now, some historians argue that Henry sustained a traumatic brain injury from the accident, noting his increasingly erratic and explosive behavior afterwards. It's one of many attempts to explain how Henry could have taken the 7 years of passion that he poured into enthroning Anne, and now could redirect it into destroying her so completely in just a few months. No doubt Anne's miscarriage disturbed the superstitious Henry. Perhaps Henry had also grown frustrated with her political interference. And there was another lady-in-waiting, in more ways than one, named Jane Seymour. Anne sensed this new threat and once drew blood in a jealous rage, ripping a locket off Jane's neck when she found out it was from the king. Anne must have sensed that Henry was beginning to see her not as a savior, but as the source of his guilt and failure. Thomas Cromwell, a lawyer and increasingly powerful state minister who had helped Henry elevate Anne to queen, was now tasked with bringing her down. A queen had never been executed in in Europe before, let alone England, so he had to find a crime to fit such a drastic punishment. Cromwell had one of Anne's musicians arrested and tortured into a confession. 5 other noblemen were accused of adultery with the queen, including Anne's own brother, on the charge of incest. The evidence was riddled with vague and inaccurate information from unconfirmed sources, but none of the defendants were allowed to see any of the information before their trial. In spite of so much against her, Anne was completely in command of herself in her trial room. One of her political enemies begrudgingly admitted that she made so wise and discerning answers to all things laid against her, exonerating herself with her words so clearly as though she had never been at fault. What was most interesting to me was Anne's defense. She suggested she was on trial not for marital fidelity, but for a different kind of disloyalty. She confessed, "I do not say I have always shown the king the humility which his goodness to me and the honors to which he raised me merited. I confess I have had jealous fancies and suspicions of him, which I had not discretion and wisdom enough to conceal at all times. But God knows, and is my witness, that I have not sinned against him in any other way." This acknowledgement gives us a glimpse into Anne's view of why their marriage imploded, but was it enough to save her? Henry Percy, who had been secretly engaged to Anne all those years ago, was forced to be on the jury because of his high rank and collapsed after reading the verdict, guilty. Now, after Anne was convicted, Henry seemed inclined to be merciful. Instead of being burnt at the stake, as the law required, she would be beheaded. He even sent to France for a special executioner who would use a sword to ensure that Anne received a single, clean blow. Anne's courage and conviction as she stood on the scaffold was so moving that many in the crowd knelt as a sign of respect. To the end, she maintained her innocence. But afterwards, she was buried in an unmarked grave in a nearby chapel, and it seemed as if Henry had won, case closed. But in one remarkable way, Anne was vindicated. Her daughter Elizabeth survived to become arguably the greatest monarch in English history. And many years later, when Elizabeth herself died, her attendants were finally able to inspect the magnificent bejeweled ring you see here. But it's not just a ring, it's a secret locket. Inside is a portrait of the Queen herself and a portrait of the woman most people believe to be her mother. I love this ring. It must have been a reminder of many things to Elizabeth in her long reign, and I like to think that in private moments of deliberation or triumph, she would sneak away and gently open the locket to gaze at the little reassuring face. It may have been through Henry that Elizabeth inherited the crown, but it was through Anne Boleyn's fierce intellect and determination that she kept it.
So the adjectives that I chose to describe Anne Boleyn on this piece are fiery, insolent, relentless, and undulating. So how does Larson evoke these feelings? She uses dissonance to achieve a mood of dissent or insubordination, while Anne essentially dares the king to try her. Larson does so by writing the interval of a major seven with a tritone sandwiched in the middle. Oops, sorry. So a major seventh is almost an octave, but then it's not. So it's pretty dissonant. And then a tritone is if you split an octave in half, you get this interval, which is very dissonant. And in fact, in the Middle Ages, it was referred to as the devil's interval. So these two intervals are prevalent in my right hand for most of the piece. So for example, another element to note is these relentless turning triplets. A triplet is a group of three notes played at a time of two. So if this is a quarter note, an eighth note is 1 T, 2 T, 3 T, and a triplet is 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 3 lolly. So this rhythmic figure was a great way to set the scene because it really creates a sense of urgency and agitation. And it's throughout most of the piece, and this is what some of the triplets sound like. So this undulation is at the heart of the drama and really highlights the waves of emotion and urgency that Anne must have felt while she was being tried. The musical quotation here is again by John Dowland from a song called If My Complaints. And this is the way the melody sounds. That tune comes around again at the end of the piece as well. If you listen to some of the original text of Dowland's song, you can see why it's such a fitting choice for Anne Boleyn. Some examples of that text are, if my complaints could passions move, or make love see wherein I suffer wrong. Thy wounds do freshly 6. And then lastly, can love be rich and yet I want? Is love my judge and yet I am condemned? Larson slips this musical quote into a section that is in stark contrast to the rest of the piece. Not only does the tempo slow, but the entire rhythmic structure expands, and we are even treated to some major chords. She has noted that there's a lute strum in measure 27. We get a D major chord. During this section, Anne reminds Henry of the loving words he had written to her. She begs him, try me, good king, and then we will return to the fast tempo from earlier. What has happened to our laptop?
We just skipped those slides.
Where are we now? Sorry. So the okay. So in the final section, beginning in My Measure 72, my right hand quotes, "If my complaints again," and the texture of the accompaniment becomes extremely thin with fewer expressive markings, as you can see here. It feels sort of stoic, and perhaps Anne feels resigned to the fact that she will be beheaded. After all the previous motion, it feels to him like the air has been sucked out of the room, and the ending is absolutely haunting. Something to note is during this title song cassette, Soraya will sing the phrase, "Try me, good king," 6 times, with the final plea being sung at the highest pitch of the song on C6. See if you can notice a slightly different delivery each time she says these words. Might be daring, sarcastic, desperate, angry, begging, etc., while she performs Anne Boleyn.
Let me have a lawful try, and let not She worked diligently to restore Henry's relationship with his daughter Mary, and when Mary was finally allowed to return to court, Jane gave her a diamond to symbolize her affection. And of course, she fulfilled the ultimate role of a queen in delivering a healthy baby boy, Edward. See? The joy she must have felt would have been indescribable. Not only was it a personal triumph, but she could rest knowing that she had secured the peace of her nation by providing a legitimate heir for the Tudor dynasty. As a mother to the future queen, she would have been elevated to an untouchable status. But sadly, postpartum complications left her dead 12 days later. Her death left a vacuum in Henry's life that would be impossible to fill, as several other wives would soon discover. And when Henry himself died 10 years later, it was next to Jane that he chose to be buried. In the first part of the song, Jane celebrates the birth of her son, and then sings in praise of the Tudor rose, which is a symbol of peace. In the century leading up to the Tudor era, England had been plagued by outbursts of civil war between two branches of the royal family, the Lancastrians and the Yorkists. Henry's father, Henry VII, had been the most unlikely Lancastrian to succeed in this long conflict, but his defeat of Yorkist Richard III cleared the way for him to take the throne. There were still threats from Yorkists that Henry was a master of propaganda. When he took Elizabeth of York as his queen, he took a symbol from each of their houses, a red rose for the Lancastrians and a white for the Yorkists, and combined them into the Tudor rose to create an image that represented the stability and unity that Henry VII's reign promised. Their sons Arthur and Henry were the physical embodiment of this peace, and now Jane celebrates that through her son, that peace will continue into the next generation.
The atmosphere of this song is generally peaceful, but with trouble brewing, and it's pensive and sweet, like a lullaby. In music theory, the word contrapuntal means two or more melodic lines. I think of this song as contrapuntal, but not in a strict sense of the word. Even though there aren't fully developed musical lines that are independent of each other being performed simultaneously, there are different musical ideas happening simultaneously. So the top voice in my right hand at the beginning is this. And then the middle voices. And then finally the lowest voice. So this is all happening at the same time. I also think of this as emotional counterpoint. Two things can be true at the same time, and humans can experience more than one emotion at the same time. After childbirth, she must have felt overwhelming joy and love, intense pain, relief, and during that time in history, fear of either mother or child dying. Larson set the song in a meter of 6/8, which is a common time signature for a lullaby because it creates a natural rocking or swinging motion. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And there's a lot of lullabies that you might recognize that have this meter. Or the musical quote that Larson chose for this song is "Lo, how a rose ere blooming," which is a really brilliant choice because of the Tudor rose that Elizabeth just referenced. The song is by Michael Pretorius, and it appears several times throughout this song, beginning with measure 1. The most extended quote is in measure 17 through 20. The text dates back to 16th century Germany with a harmonization that we recognize, written by Pretorius in 1609. He was a German composer, organist, and musical theorist, famous for his 3-volume treatise on music theory and instruments. He was, I thought this was really interesting, he was also a pivotal musical figure in the Protestant Reformation, and he was crucial in legitimizing the use of instruments in Lutheran worship. You will hear bells toll throughout this piece, but here they are more celebratory and not foreboding like they were in the first song we heard. The bell figure symbolizes the announcement of the birth of the royal baby, and so you'll hear figures like this. Sort of like chimes. There's another figure that I think sounds like a trumpet fanfare along with the total bells. So we've got this dotted rhythmic figure. It's in the bright key of D, which just so happens to be the common key that the natural trumpets in the Renaissance period were tuned to. I do think that Larson thought of this. She's so calculated throughout the set, and she really has carefully considered every compositional decision. This song is more peaceful than the others because it employs far more consonant intervals than the other songs, so we hear octaves, and sixths, thirds, and even triads. It even ends on a major third in the accompaniment with the singer humming the final notes as if she's quietly putting the baby to bed. Here is Jane Seymour.
so they'd have a mutual interest. As always, Henry led with his heart. For their first meeting, Henry decided to play a game of courtly love and make a surprise visit to Anne, disguised among his fellow noblemen. According to the rules of chivalry and Henry's imagination, it would be love at first sight, and she would recognize his kingly grace and noble bearing instantly beneath his plain clothing. But beneath that plain clothing, Henry was now also carrying close to 400 pounds, as well as a festering ulcer on his leg that carried a potent stench. Poor Anne had no idea what was happening, because when Henry approached with a gift in front of the others, she completely ignored him, and I understand. He became more bold, attempting to give her a kiss, but she pushed him away. Who knows how long the awkward nightmare endured before Henry slunk away to change, but the damage was irreparable. He furiously snapped to Cromwell afterwards, "I like her not," and complained she was nothing like her portrait. And this is where most people develop the idea that Anne of Cleves was ugly. Now, neither Anne Boleyn nor Jane Seymour were praised as great beauties, so the reality is probably that Henry was more repulsed by her lack of presence than her appearance. And the Tudors understood the necessity of image and inspiring confidence, so it's not just Henry's personal vanity, at least not entirely. But with the European threat still looming, Henry reluctantly went through with the wedding. If you thought the first date was bad, the wedding night is far worse. Henry complained that Anne was so physically repulsive that he could not even consummate the marriage. He even made the dangerous accusation he did not think she was a virgin. Even if Anne didn't speak the language, it was clear to her that something was seriously wrong. After 6 months of this unusual dynamic, Henry received a break. The treaty between France and the Holy Roman Empire collapsed, and now Henry was no longer dependent on a foreign alliance. Anne was unexpectedly moved to Richmond Palace, and an investigation was launched into their marriage. Her ladies stated at one point she collapsed into tears of fear of what might happen to her. She must have recited her motto, "God send me well to keep," many times as she awaited the court's decision, and you can hear her relief in the letter she writes to the king, which is the source of Saraya's next song, when she learns that her fate would be much different than that of her predecessors. If she agreed to them that the marriage had never been consummated, she would receive a fabulous settlement and had her wedding ring broken into pieces and returned to Henry as a symbol of her complete agreement to the terms. Under her new title of beloved sister of the king, Anne enjoyed honor, wealth, and independence. She also received this house at Hever Castle, which was also the childhood home of Anne Boleyn. So think about that for a second. She became popular at court and was loved by both Princesses Mary and Elizabeth. And she outlasted Henry, his final 2 wives, and his son, King Edward VI. When Anne did die in Queen Mary's reign, she was given a magnificent funeral at Westminster Abbey. Anne's life may not have been what she wanted, but she made it into her own, a luxury none of Henry's other queens ever enjoyed.
The words that I use to describe this song are jaunty, discombobulated, buoyant, and slightly confused. So, how does Larson achieve this atmosphere? She set this song in 6/8 like the previous song, but this is with a quick tempo, so it feels more like it could be a carefree sea shanty. The pianist is instructed to play boisterously. The musical quotation for this song is an air by English composer Thomas Campion titled, "I Care Not for These Ladies." First of all, rude. It's a fitting song to draw from, considering that Henry changed his mind about Anne and sent her away. So this is the tune from the original song. What it sounds like. So it's less cute. required to marry Henry VIII, considering what his previous wives had experienced. But I would imagine she also felt a little bit of shame for being sent away. Throughout the set, Lady Larson gives many acting cues, like you might see in a script for a play or an opera. An example of the instructions are to sing as a matter of fact, with irony, cheerfully, beaming, outfoxing them, winking, and the final cue is to sing gleefully. Here is Anna, please.
He began exercising and hunting again. and he showered Catherine with jewels, clothes, and very open, very public displays of affection. Some contemporaries describe her as vain, airheaded, and immature, just relishing the superficial delights of queenship. But she did seem to have a promising start. As her motto and badge suggest, she too styled herself as an obedient peacemaker. No other will than his, the Tudor lives. She was well received on her travels north with Henry on a diplomatic visit called a Progress, and she was given the title a jewel for womanhood by those impressed with her growing confidence. But Catherine was living a double life. Even before Catherine's triumphant progress north, she and Culpeper had been sending letters and meeting in secret. It was insane. Catherine was the most visible woman in England, and Culpeper, one of Henry's most popular courtiers. Their go-between was Lady Rochford, better known as Jane Boleyn, who probably accused her husband George of incest with his sister Anne. If anyone knew the danger of even the appearance of impropriety, it was her. But all throughout the Progress north, they held secret meetings and were always on the verge of discovery. The only reason I can offer for this reckless behavior is maybe they hoped Henry would soon die, and then Catherine would be free to marry Culpeper and reward Lady Rochford for her assistance. But the reality was that their relationship was a ticking time bomb, and it was about to go off. It started with the return of Francis Deering. He was probably blackmailing Catherine for a position at court, and his reckless attempts at familiarity with her drew notice from her attendants. It must have been a nightmare for Catherine. Comments from servants about her past set off an investigation, and all that we know soon became known to members of Henry's council. Deering was arrested first and defended himself by accusing Culpeper of taking his place in the Queen's affections. Then, a love letter to Culpeper from the Queen was found. Catherine was arrested, and it's here that, according to the legend, she broke from her guards and raced down the long gallery at Hampton Court, hoping to find Henry in the chapel and beg for his mercy. But he was already gone. Archbishop Thomas Cranmer, one of my favorite Tudor figures, was the only official to defend Anne Boleyn, and now he found himself deeply disturbed by Catherine's hysterical fits in her chambers. He described her in such lamentation and heaviness as I never saw no creature, so that it would have pitied any man's heart in the world to have looked upon. He helped her gain enough composure to write out a confession that presents her as many see her today, a young girl who was a victim of neglect and the vices of older men. Henry was devastated. The last illusions of his youth were destroyed, and he wanted revenge. Culpeper was only beheaded since he was a nobleman. Deering was hung, drawn, and quartered. Catherine and Lady Rochford would be beheaded. The night before, Catherine asked for the executioner's block and practiced gently laying her head on it for hours to make sure she did it properly for the axeman. Witnesses at the time of her execution reported that she was so weak she had to be assisted up the stairs, but not much was said about her last words. Then, years later, this more dramatic speech was reported as the observations of an anonymous witness in a Spanish account. So how should we consider the words in this song? One reason this version endures is because it satisfies our desire to see this young girl, this victim, have one honest moment that is all her own. More importantly, it shows that even in the generations that followed Henry VIII, there was a desire to show Catherine's flaws in a more sympathetic light. Perhaps this vulnerability and defiance expressed in this subversion is a small measure of the compassion that Catherine's ghost still cries out for in her haunted wanderings through Hampton Court.
The adjectives that I chose to describe this last piece are terrified, highly emotional, hysterical, and unnerving. The interval of the half step is very prevalent throughout this piece, which I think elicits the unnerving quality. It's a serpentine and crawling at 60 beats per minute for a while. I've written for you in red here. There's just all sorts of examples of half steps throughout this piece. As the song which create an impassioned and distraught atmosphere. Look at all the tempo and dynamic markings just in these 4 measures. It's very intense. There's just a lot going on the page. You will also hear bell tolls that chime out Catherine's fate throughout the piece. For me, this is the most dramatic of the set, even more so than Anne Boleyn. And perhaps partly because Catherine Howard was a teenager, so she was likely more emotional and probably just more scared than the other queens. Larson has marked these instructions to the performers. She says, with expectant fear, like a frightened child, half-voiced, pushing ahead, becoming more anguished. The musical quotation for this piece is John Dowland's In Darkness Let Me Dwell, which we heard in the first song of the set. So Larson bookends this set of songs with the same tune. You'll hear it played by my left hand in the opening, and right before the final measure of the song, there's a series of cascading tritones which seem to indicate the blows of the executioner. And then in the final measure, you'll hear the tune In Darkness Let Me Dwell one final time. Here's the final song of the set, Catherine Howard.
that she was a child, that she was young. And so after meeting with her and then finding out about the abuse, that really helped change my perspective and my approach to singing that piece. So yeah, that was how I did that.
For Abigail, which one was your most challenging piece, or which one was your favorite?
And please, the ironic thing about Anna Please is it's probably the easiest one for soprano to sing. It's like in the middle register. The rhythm is not crazy, and I'm over here fighting for my life. It's like these cascading tritones in my left hand are super awkward. So while it probably doesn't sound like it's the most challenging, it really was. And then the second most challenging would be Anne Boleyn. I think it's hard to choose my favorite, but Jane Seymour, the one that quotes Slow How a Rose, I just think it's really, really pretty. And I just, Donald Gordon, is that you? Oh my gosh, hi! I haven't seen you in a long time. It's good to see you. Yes.
Yes. Question for the musicians. How long did it take you to learn this well enough that you felt good about it?
Sure. That's a good question. After I graduated from Hardin-Simmons, I continued taking voice lessons with Dr. Chambers. And she knew that I wanted to keep singing, and she challenged me and presented this set to me. And at first I did not like it, because, I think the good thing about this lecture is that Abigail gets to present the music first to you guys, and then you get to listen to it. From my perspective, listening to it cold, I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening? So it took me a long time. I did not really feel comfortable for a while because in the first song, Catherine Aragon, there's no measure line, so bar lines, there's no time signature. Like, how in the world am I supposed to learn this? So of course I had to go to the piano and play every single note and sing it, and then work very closely with Abigail on listening to those nuances. But I also just had to start building that muscle memory to know, okay, this chord doesn't make any sense, but I have to sing this note somehow, and so that this is what that note feels like in my voice every single time. So I think it took, like a year? About 9 months of us prepping for it before we officially performed it in 2022. And I was scared to do it then, but I was like, I'm just gonna rip off the Band-Aid. And I felt much more confident doing it this time, and my voice has changed in the last 3 years as well. So,
I mean, I'm a good sight reader, but this is not sight reading material. So it was challenging. Just to look at the picture, there's a lot of markings, there's a lot of accidentals, changes. So it was a challenge, but I really liked the challenge, so it was really fun to work on. And I feel like every time I play it, I notice something different and something really engaging or interesting about the composition. Yeah, it took a while, but it's so rewarding to play. I'm so glad to get the chance to do it with my dear friend, Soraya. So, yes.
How long did y'all work together before you performed on this piece?
Let's see. The first time we did it, we met weekly with Dr. Chambers for a few months, just kind of working through it. And then when we brought it back to this recital, we met like 3 times. We didn't meet that many times, but we both knew the piece so much better this time that it didn't take as much preparation. But also when you work with a partner that you're used to, you kind of know what they're going to do and how she's breathing and how she's feeling on a certain day. So the ensemble was not as challenging to put together as you might expect, just because we know each other well and work together well.
yes.
Elizabeth,
Yes.
so the content that you presented, that's all your content, right?
I do have a list of some of my favorite sources. I mean, that's the most challenging part. Is just how do you take, hours and thousands of pages of history and condense it. But a great place to start is the History of England podcast. It's this, old middle-aged British man that just has a self-deprecating humor, and he's so great using primary sources. So a lot of my quotes and knowing where to go to find like actual written pieces is from that podcast. And then Alison Weir writes a lot about queenship throughout history. I think she starts in 1066 and ends with Elizabeth I. And so she just has a great understanding of just the role of a queen. And it was a really powerful position. I think we tend to see these women as just these tragic victims who just kind of, lined up to the guillotine or the chopping block.